The World Free Zones Organization presents New World Model, the Future of Industry. Featuring David Abney from UPS, Umberto De Preto from the International Road Transport Union, Christopher Logan from Accenture, Sultan bin Sulayem from DP World.
Welcome to our virtual discussion on the logistics sector. The speakers we have interviewed for you have explored the challenges and opportunities facing shipping firms, transport companies, and the wider set of logistics players as they try to cope with a drastic fall in volume and tighter restrictions on trading dynamics worldwide. The questions cover the evolution of the crisis, the vectors of change observed in the industry, the way in which business models would evolve, and the impact on the global supply chain. Each speaker's full interview is also available on the event site for your viewing pleasure. Be sure to look out for our industry report on the sector, which we will publish shortly after this event. I hope you will obtain valuable intelligence from this panel, along with the other online discussions, interview, and live webinars that this event has to offer.
What has changed most radically in the industry during this crisis?
First is the speed of change and the need to be able to adjust and adapt. It's just quicker than anything that we've seen before. Every day you didn't know what was going to happen.
But what impacted us most because of this pandemic was, of course, our cash flow. And we've done analyses of what has been the actual cash flow and in the reduction in turnover. And we see that globally, we're in the neighborhood, very conservatively speaking, of 550 billion euros in loss. That's conservative. And that's in freight.
Second area of transformation has been the rise of the customer expectations. Now, again, ride-sharing apps and e-commerce have really driven B2C customer expectations. But now, B2B customers, freight, logistics, and trade customers are expecting the same level of service. And now that we've been locked down and we're relying so much more on interpersonal technology, those expectations are much higher than they were, and they're not coming back.
So we have to make changes. We move people to the port to be closed and to avoid the lockdown. And then, of course, we have expedited launching many digital platforms that will help us. So the big change for me is really how much our business today is digital.
Which types of companies have been the most affected?
The interesting thing about this situation is that all companies, one way or the other, have been affected. And now when you first think about it, you think about the ones whose capacity was decreased almost immediately.
So in terms of the types of companies that are most affected by this, from a negative perspective, it's truly the small and medium companies. Across the world, across sectors, they are struggling. They're going to struggle. They've struggled with cash availability. They've struggled with the ability to generate new cash, either through financial markets or through government programs, whereas large companies have got generally larger cash reserves and the ability to raise new funds. And that is the biggest constraining factor. And the longer that this economic crisis goes on, the more difficult it's going to be for small and medium companies.
If you're a small and medium-sized company, the only relief you can have is really government stepping in and saying, here, let us keep you alive so that when we do have a recovery, you as the road transport industry can actually help drive that. We saw in particular in the Middle East, this was a big issue, cash flow, and it will remain a key obstacle in overcoming the pandemic.
Hotels have been hit very badly. Airlines, definitely. Airports. So passengers are affected. Cargo is still moving. But when you talk about that, there are other businesses that have increased more than last year when you're comparing the same period last year. For example, pharmaceutical.
In what region will the impact be most severe in the short term?
Everybody's hit. However, I think countries that have tried to tackle the problem and resolve it will be faster to get out.
So right now you've got the Chinese economy, which is back to close to 10% of its full capacity, and the rest of the world that is still reeling from these economic impacts. And so it's interesting to note that China will probably lead the recovery for the rest of the world out of this crisis.
In other regions, if we look at Europe, it's minus 17% or a total of minus 64%. Here I'm talking only freight. North America, minus 12%, but in terms of volume, minus 72 billion. In South America, minus 20%, or minus 29 billion. So I mean, it's devastating. Everyone has said nobody's come out of this unscathed.
We believe this builds the case of the importance of inclusive, sustainable supply chains. We think it builds the case that multilateral trade agreements and bilateral trade agreements are even more important now than ever before with all this change.
What is the greatest challenge to overcome in the short term?
Number one, particularly for the smaller companies, is stay alive. You need to conserve your cash and you need to stay alive. And you need to take care of your staff, your customers, and yourselves. And as we all know, in whatever business you're in, that's easier said than done.
The most immediate short term was, and still is available transit lanes that open and close as the virus starts to progress in some areas and recedes in others.
My view on this is very simple. If you don't help the industry that can drive all the rest of the trade, well, then you're missing out. Start with the industry that will drive trade, that will drive the economic recovery. If they're out of business, if they're not there, you'll have nothing to move the goods.
And you see exporters and importers are dealing directly with retailers around the world. Retail is hard today. And so a lot of product going to go using Amazon, Alibaba, and many of the online business. So there where you see that people will change.
How should companies adapt to face this challenge?
Everybody today have to realize that they have to change the way they operate. And I think using the digital technology, using the platform, we have launched many platforms for our freight forwarding companies.
Now, the logistics business is notorious for using very old IT systems. Now, that is not going to be acceptable anymore. The vast majority of companies will need to completely rebuild their main operating systems. If they haven't done so in the last 2 or 3 years, they have to do that now.
No, we're all already, everything is digital, but you still have to carry the paper because the law says you need to carry the paper, which is ridiculous. And the same goes with every other transport document. We need to just get rid of the paper. We're in a world that all the technology exists. Let's start using the technology that's at our disposal to become more flexible, more adaptable, more interoperable, and more transparent in everything we do.
The more information you have about what's going on, the more you can make those changes. And that's the new normal, is that we're going to be changing. We're going to be changing every day. And we just have to be adjustable. We have to be flexible. And we have to be able to adapt very quickly.
What new business models are likely to emerge in the medium to long term?
First and foremost, as I just said, digitalization. That will be everything. But in digitalization, what you'll probably start seeing more is move towards blockchain and the impact of blockchain on all of our transactions, saying let's put everything in one hub and make sure that everything is more transparent and interoperable.
But we do see that the companies are going to be focused much more on digital commerce and multimodal supply chains and the ability to flex at a moment's notice.
What it does mean is they're going to need to adapt their business models to incorporate the best of the e-commerce business models and the best of the new digitally oriented logistics company business models in order to thrive and survive. And I think the best ones will be able to do that, but the ones who do not invest are really going to struggle.
And I cannot really, nobody can forecast how long would this will happen or what will happen. But I believe that we'll be more efficient. The change will be more efficient. We'll remove many of the waste that we waste today in our time, in our overhead, and we'll be more lean.
What new opportunities will this create?
There is lots more work to do to speed and ease the flow of goods across borders, and that will be absolutely critical for our recovery. So yes, public sector's got a big role to play in the economic recovery and the dynamics of the logistics industry.
You could have a border where the truck doesn't even stop. With the technology we have today, we send everything in advance to customs. Customs just can scan and say, okay, this is it. We know this person. We know where they're going. We know what they're carrying. We know where they're going to. We know everything about what's in the truck, about the driver, about the company, everything. Why do they need to stop?
A passenger and a driver and nobody in between. And so what will happen is people who need a service will be able to get the service directly from the people providing it. There will be no room for middlemen. So people who are in the business of being the middleman, they better have something more serious to do because they will face that problem. It is happening now.
Now, financial situations can determine some of that, but the mentality of the leadership of companies can also have a big effect on that. And sometimes when it's the most risky to step forward is when true leaders do need to step forward. And we're seeing that in many cases.
How will these changes transform the industry value chain?
Transformation that will take place towards digital and towards autonomous will impact all stakeholders, and drivers will be impacted by this. The issue that our industry is facing right now is that we have a shortage of drivers around the world.
And we see companies that are more focused on building in redundancy. From our aspect, we see companies that are much more open to outsourcing their logistics and concentrating on their core competencies. And so that creates opportunities for us, of course.
And we are looking today, people talk in the supply chain about what is important. Everybody talk about the last mile. And I would say, in our experience, it's the first mile and last mile, and anything in between. It's very important. This adoption of the digital technology in our everyday business is going to give us very precise information. Will make us able to budget, forecast, and manage the supply chain more efficiently.
All of these changes are improving the experience for consumers and improving the efficiency and the flexibility for companies that make and ship goods and companies that import and sell and market these goods. And so the real winners will be all of these players in the business, and this is the true win out of all of this.
For more insights from each of our speakers, please take a look at our exclusive individual in-depth interviews available on our website.